Why don't we go to, yeah, did we do item 10? Did we do, no, why don't we do item 10 first? And then I think we'll get item 10, why don't we do item 10 first if that's okay? I think it's a,
There's 10 and 11 that kind of go back to back, so.
you know, I'd like to get 10 and 11 taken care of, and then we'll come back to the retirement report, the research, and, okay, 10 and 11, and do those. These are both information items and updates on the pension solution update and the risk oversight report. So,
I wanted to.
Sure, please.
I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure that we introduce Randy Doyle, who is the project manager over the pension solution. I know he's been introduced before, but I don't know if he's presented before to you. So I think this is the first time that he'll be presenting. We'll have a long relationship with him doing this, but this is his first time.
Right. Okay. So who's going to kick it off?
So Randy, Cassandra mentioned, Randy is the project manager, and he will go over. We have quite a bit, like 8 or 9 slides. So we'll go over with that. What we did.
8 is better than 9. You could do 8. Would be great.
And
get to 9, that would be okay, but shoot for 8.
Okay. Okay. So what we did so far, where we are on this project, and what is our next step.
Perfect.
Okay, Randy.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for your time. And again, moving on.
Yeah. Is it?
Got on, yeah?
No, press. Okay. You are.
Thanks. Anyway, glad to be here. Thanks for your time. And as Ashish said, a couple of things. We wanted to just do a little summary background of the project first. Talk about what the project is. And then our main thing we wanted to bring back from the previous ask was our current activities on our schedule and some of our resource projections, what we're looking for in the future. So many of you may be aware of this, so it's a little refresher, or again, some of you that are new, but what is Pension Solution Project? Again, our primary goal is to replace our existing legacy pension solution, aka START. Many of you are aware of that. There's some other ancillary systems with that. Some of the primary benefits for doing that will bring in a new technology platform. It's going to allow us to better administer, be a little more flexible and nimble. Also with the solution that's coming in, it's going to extend or bring in some additional system functionality. And will also allow our business to look at areas for process improvement and where places we can extend service and give more value to our members. And lastly, one of the key items, again, with the new system coming in, there will be a lot more benefit and opportunity to put in more controls in terms of consistent data coming in, auditing that data, and just give us a little more tighter controls with some of our data. Why are we undertaking this project? And again, many of you probably are aware, but again, a little refresher. Our current state, there's some risk to the organization, both from the technology layer as well as from the business side. The current START system is built on some legacy platform, older tool sets. We're seeing that platform is on the sunset path. And also we're seeing a decrease in the number of support resources out there that can really support it and maintain it. In addition, the legislative changes come through or business processes come along. A very simple minor change can take 6 months to 12 months to really go through the design, implementation, build. So our hope is the new system is going to allow us, as I said previously, be a little more nimble, flexible, and mitigate some of these risks that we're faced with. Okay? So current accomplishments, again, the CGI onboarded, we started early July. Since that time, we've gone through our primary theme has been our phase 1 activities. In there, we did on the July-August timeframe, we conducted our kickoff activities, bringing the core team members as well as some of our subject matter experts or SMEs in. We also went through a task and activity in phase 1. There was 15 key deliverables. Those were primarily our project management tools. Our tools, our rules of engagement, if you will, how we're going to manage our schedule, manage our resources, deal with our issue risk management, communication plan, decision, So it's more of the tools to help us how we're going to really manage the effort. And the bottom line there, the baseline of the project schedule is very key. To use Jack's words, I think we're being thoughtful and calm about this. Our approach to scheduling on this right now, we're being very aware that, you know, for the 5-year effort, there's some really key milestones out there. But our primary focus is we're doing some rolling wave schedule and planning. So meaning every 90 days, we kind of project and look out to a 9-month look ahead. And again, we're still trying to be very aware of key milestones out there. And you'll see here in a future slide, we have a really good plan, tasks, activities, and resources allocated to get us through the spring timeframe. And here in December, we're going to start again looking at the next 9-month wave to do future planning. So when we come back, you know, you'll continually hear us talking about our rolling wave planning, and we're always looking at like a 9-month horizon. And for that, it gives us an opportunity to really be very clear and precise in some of our resource allocation or resource estimates. Okay. Some other accomplishments continuing along the way. You know, I've been involved in some of these projects before, and while my primary focus as the PM is to get the system implemented and get it delivered, but there's a really big aspect of this about the change management and what the organization is going to be undertaking. There's a lot of business process change, new ways of doing business, and it's really important, even though we're in the early stages of doing the design for the implementation, we need to already start looking at what is the impact going to be to the business. And so there's a whole separate team in our organizational change management that's starting that effort. What they've done right now, they've identified our change liaisons and ambassadors, and those are manager level and staff people in the organization that are out there working to communicate where the project is going, bringing feedback back to the project as well. So we're working pretty closely with the change management folks. Other items that we've kind of closed out too, as I mentioned, so we did all our kickoff meetings. We had 200 plus people participate through there, and we also did a large amount of training to those individuals in terms of what's expected of them, how to effectively team with Team CGI, how do we work through the Simmons challenges, and again, we kind of shared with them some of our project management tools that we're focused on. And our key thing, I'm going to talk on the next slide in a little more detail, is our requirements confirmation, and that's from a project perspective, this is probably the most beneficial to you. When the RFP actually went out, there was 2,100 plus requirements that were documented in the RFP. And Team CGI responded to those, talked about how they would address those. They are broken down in some different categories. We have business requirements, which are more of the process sorts of things, the life cycle of the member, what is it that CalSTRS does within the organization. We had technical requirements. Those dealt more around some of the hardware, disaster recovery. And then we had service requirements, and those, again, more touched on what I talked about before a little bit with some of our project management tools, how we're going to do things, dealing with training, and our transition support. And so what we've been doing since the first week of September is going through those 2,100 plus requirements, and we're bringing in SMEs from the organization to validate those requirements, to find out, okay, the RFP was put together and went out 2-3 years ago. Are these still valid requirements? Just confirm they're still accurate, or we're doing some further elaboration that maybe that requirement really is morphed into additional requirements. So we're capturing that, and that is actually going to be our blueprint now going forward as we start to transition to our design activities. Any questions on that? Okay. So at a high level, and as I mentioned before, we are trying to be aware and sensitive that, you know, it's a fixed bid arrangement with Team CGI, and there's certain key milestones throughout that we're trying to be aware of all that. But as we're doing our planning, and again, we've just gone through our phase 1 planning, and our focus has really been to get us through that, what we're calling up there phase 2. It's our requirements confirmation and conceptual design. And you can see that's underway now and goes into the spring timeframe. And out of that, we will be producing our business, our conceptual design docs, technical design docs. Those are our blueprints, if you will. And at that point, we'll have a better understanding how do we now start moving forward to implement. And again, if you take a look down the page there, we have our function rollout 1, 2, and 3. What we're looking at right now is we're trying to, the rollout, the implementation, again, we're not going with a big bang approach, but we are trying to do an incremental rollout, and we're following the life of a member. So what's planned to go in the first wave will be the active members. New teachers coming in, doing the enrollment, bringing them on, and their payroll contributions. The second wave that you see is the functional rollout 2 is going to focus more on the retired side and doing the payment and the calculations. And in the third wave, it's under the customer service, but it's enhancing some more of the online customer service and some of the features for the members. So, if you look at this right now, it looks like there's really nice, clean, straight lines, but it's not necessarily that. What we need to go through this effort right now between now and the spring to really define how much can we roll out in that functional rollout 1. We know there's going to be some portions of 1 that probably need to go into functional rollout 2 and vice versa. So, and again, I think we've been talking, it's probably in the springtime when we'll have a better blueprint and picture of how things really look with our implementation, and that might be a good time to come back unless you want us to come back sooner. I think the other item, the phase 3 up there that's just talking about the hosting, as you know, the infrastructure is not going to be hosted here. We're actually using a data center over in McClellan Park, and there's a disaster recovery site in Austin, Texas. And the way we're approaching this right now is we're only purchasing and implementing what we need at the time. So that first drop is really bringing in some of our development and initial environments needed for the initial build. The drop B will bring in and deliver our production environment, and then the drops 3 and 4 will support our future stages. So again, the thought is we know what we need, but we're only purchasing and implementing the systems what we need as we move through time. Any questions there? So this slide mostly, and this gets back to what we were talking about, where we're really focused on a 9-month duration, and where we are right now is in this phase 2 of doing our requirements confirmation and our conceptual and technical design. So you can see the key tasks and activities along the bottom. The grid up on top is really, we do have a pretty detailed schedule in place. It's fully resource loaded. We have all of our individuals. We're trying to break it down where when I say we have a CalSTRS core, those are people that are assigned to the project full time, and the SMEs are, again, our subject matter experts, where we'll have people come in from various areas within the business. So you can see there's kind of an ebb and flow where as we get further into the requirements confirmation, there's more people coming in, and then we back some of those off, and then when we get further into the functional design and we get around to actually having to do the review and confirmation of that design, again, you'll see more business folks being pulled in. And the third line up there, the CGI resources, again, that's just their committed resource count. I think at the end of this, we're supposed to have close to 80 or 82, I think, CGI resources on site, and there's a number that will be off site. So again, that's from a scheduling and resource estimation, that's where we are right now. And again, in the springtime frame, we'll be doing that for the next 9 months. Will get us through our build and development activities. I think just some key milestones. Again, I kind of might have touched over this quickly, but we are bringing in a COT solution. It's off-the-shelf product, and what we're doing with our requirements confirmation now is we're doing this gap fit gap analysis, where we're pretty much taking our requirements and we're aligning that to the application as is to find out how much does the application meet all of our requirements, and where do we have a difference or a gap that we're going to have to do some customization. Out of that, again, we'll have our requirements traceability tool that will be used throughout the life of the project. That will be a thing our IV&V vendor will use. They want to evaluate if we received all of our functionality. We'll also tie that into our testing strategy, that we'll have test cases behind all those requirements so we can validate those. And then part of the functional and technical design, there's also that business alignment, where, again, we're taking some of the functionality of the application and aligning that to processes within the organization. So the key item, again, is the March-April timeframe. Our functional and technical design docs will be our blueprint for going forward for the various functional rollouts and what the new system is going to look like. So I think that's all I had because of questions.
Thank you. I don't see any. It's reassuring, the rollout period, the way in which you're doing that incrementally, and which segment of our population you're dealing with. The lack of the Big Bang Theory, that's very wise. And so a couple of things that I picked up on this, it's very, very helpful.
So we come back when we have more details, so periodically, and maybe February we are coming back for our data, how we were handling the data. So Robin and I will be coming here and provide you what is our plan for handling the data. I heard that a lot of concern about the data, so we will be coming here in February.
Ms. Higa?
Thank you. Just a quick question. So I think Dana raised a question a little bit earlier today about the contract for the IV&V vendor. So we just tried to distinguish between what they were testing versus what Grant Thornton does. So on the slide you had maybe two back that showed, the sort of estimates and some of the milestones. This general schedule, holding to schedule, meeting milestones, assessing our ability to meet milestones, that's really the portion that Grant Thornton is helping us to validate and track. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Good. Anything else? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Graham, come on. Graham Finley from Grant Thornton, Project Risk Oversight Report update. I'm going to ask Ms. Hendricks to. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Graham Finley with Grant Thornton. Going to present our regular oversight report on the two Business Renew projects. We'll start with the pension solution. So as Randy had said, the projects have been going through the stage one planning activities. And when we last spoke, I'd mentioned that of all of those planning deliverables, the one we considered the most important was the master schedule. And that's what we'd be focusing a lot on. So the master schedule has been approved and baselined. We did our own independent review of the schedule. We think it's a good schedule. We think it's a pretty good, solid foundation for the project to plan on and to track progress, and we'll be monitoring, the project's progress against that schedule. But we do think all the necessary activities are there, dependencies have been identified, the durations are reasonable, and the resources that are necessary to execute those activities have been considered. So we think it's a pretty good schedule for starting the work. In terms of phase one, the planning activities and startup phase, the project had anticipated being complete with that by now. They have one deliverable remaining outstanding. So we'll be looking to CalSTRS and CGI to complete that one remaining planning deliverable. And at that point, phase one can be closed out. The lack of completion of phase one has not stopped phase two from continuing, though. So it's phase two, which is the requirements confirmation and conceptual design. That started on time, and those activities remain on schedule. In our last report to you, we highlighted a risk around the CGI team business lead. The originally proposed business lead for CGI was not able to start on the project as planned. And we'd anticipated that a replacement would have arrived by this point, and that's actually the case, that the replacement CGI business lead started this Monday. So that team is now complete and that position is filled. Any questions on pension solution? Okay, talk about data prep. You will have been aware that there's a procurement that's been underway for a data strategist to support the data prep project. That data strategist has been selected, and I think November 23rd is the anticipated start date when they'll be coming on board. The pension solution master schedule includes the tasks and timeframes necessary to address all the data issues that are known to impact that first functional release that Randy mentioned. So, something we've been talking about periodically over the last year or so is the level of confidence we'd have that, in fact, data prep was actually going to be able to support the pension solution project and would be able to address those data issues in time. It appears that's pretty confident for this first release, at least, because all of the resources necessary to address those data issues for that first release have been identified. The one remaining uncertainty is that some of the more complex policy issues that the data preparation team is just starting to get into now, those have not yet been analyzed, and so there's still a possibility something could come out of that might impact that first release, but that's something that the project will just have to monitor over time. And the pension solution team and the data preparation team are in regular communication about these issues. So if something does come up, there'll be the project will adapt to that. Given the continued progress of the project to date, particularly as the data strategist contract has been awarded and the movement into the addressing the more complex data issues, unless anything unusual happens or unexpected happens in the next couple of weeks, we're expecting to upgrade this project to green. It's in pretty good shape right now. So any questions on data prep?
I don't see any.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks. Cool. All right, so where are we in the agenda? That is the question. He doesn't have his up, so I'll do.
I think he wanted to go back to the.
Did he want to go back to?
Item 9.
Item 9? Okay. Elisa? Our study on the National Retirement Savings. Ms. Dobbins.
Hello, hi. Oops. Okay, I'm going to give this presentation on the research that was conducted by Ricky Pica on national retirement savings. He's done a very nice job, I think, synthesizing a large body of research, and I hope to do it justice. I'm just going to hit the highlights. Before I get started into the presentation, I want to mention that retirement preparedness and assessment of retirement risk really depends on a lot of factors, almost to the level where to assess retirement preparedness, it almost comes down to an individual situation. So summarizing the data, you have to make a lot of assumptions to start conglomerating the data to get a handle on what the trends look like. That being said, there's a handful of conclusions that really can be drawn with a lot of confidence from the research that's been published. And those include that many Americans have very little to no retirement savings, that minorities, females, people in low wage jobs and those working for small employers are those among those who have the least amount saved for retirement. Also, when looking at the research, the methodology that's used to assess retirement risk, it's very important to understand the methodology because the methodology really shapes the outcomes. Finally, we know about retirement preparedness that a little bit of help tends to result in people being better prepared. And those are the topics that I'm just going to briefly touch on. All right, so if we're going to look at retirement preparedness, we really need to have some standing to assess whether or not people have the financial means to secure their retirement. And to do this, experts really recommend a replacement rate of somewhere between 60 and 90%, with the most often cited number, the number, being 85%. We know that Social Security is expected to replace about 40% plus or minus a bit, and just the simple math says individuals need additional retirement income beyond Social Security in order to secure their retirement. And looking at where this additional income might come from, we can look at the trend line and we can look at the transition in private sector where employers had been offering more defined benefits plans, and that transition has changed to now they're offering more defined contribution plans. And the trend line, it is what it is. It's, I think, very well known. The points that are important to take away are twofold. First, employees having access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan is very important to people being prepared for retirement. And second, that when we start assessing risk of falling short in retirement, people who have been in defined benefits plans tend to fare better. So this is just a chart that shows the distribution of retirement savings among households, and the takeaway here is in the low end of the chart. 69% of American households have less than $100,000 saved for retirement. And to anchor that number, if we translate $100,000 into an annuity, an individual can expect to generate about $400 a month in retirement income. You can further, each data point, you can always kind of dig deeper. If we look at the 41% of the individuals who have no retirement savings, we might think or wonder what their situation really is. The source of this data does not report income expected from defined benefit. Of the 41% who have no savings in their retirement account, the majority of them also do not expect to receive a defined benefit. 68% do not expect that. Jumping topics a bit, I mentioned methodology matters, and there's 3 methods listed, and they're listed from methods that produce the most stringent assessment of those who are at risk for falling short in retirement to the method that's least stringent. And the target replacement rate is that percentage that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. It's the 60 to 90% replacement, often cited at 85% recommended replacement in retirement. When retirement risk is assessed, looking at an expectation that people should have 85% replacement rate, 2/3 of the population is deemed as falling short and is not expected to meet that target. The National Retirement Risk Index is an index that's produced by the Center for Retirement, CRR. Ricky, Center for Retirement? Center for Retirement Research and Possibility. Yeah, thank you. And that's a variable index. It's also a target replacement rate. But the index varies based on variables that we know affect people's preparedness. So things like what your income status is, whether you're male or female and single or married and in a dual income household or not. That index produces kind of a middle-of-the-road assessment, and it's the index that we'll look at, the index that we'll use when we look at the data and we look at the percentage at risk. Optimal drawdown is the least stringent methodology, and it produces the least gloomy outlook for people in their retirement years. It produces, when that drawdown is applied, it produces the lowest percentage of people who are deemed at risk. It does so by assuming that people will consume less as they progress through their retirement years. And this methodology is criticized because the data really doesn't support that people are going to spend less as they progress through their retirement. Our retirement readiness assessment indicates 61% of our members say that they're spending the same or more in retirement than they were prior to retiring. Furthermore, that method does not look at the expected cost of health care in retirement. So this is the index that I was describing, and the numbers presented here take into account all of the variables that are considered, and they express them across income level. So what you see is that by this methodology, the expectation is those who earn more money are not expected to need to replace as high a percent of their pre-retirement income as those who are not making as much money. And when that specific index is applied to the current standard, the current financial situation of Americans, the latest data reported is for 2013. It shows that 52% of the households are at risk of falling short, and that designation is determined by those who are below 10% of their target. So again, shifting topics a bit, there are a number, really two primary variables that impact retirement preparedness. So I started the presentation saying people do better with a little help. With a little help, people wind up being more prepared. The two things that seem to help folks be prepared the most are, one, having access to an employer-sponsored retirement savings plan, and two, having their retirement savings plan have some automatic features incorporated. So I've got a couple of slides on having access to employer-sponsored plans. 65% of private sector workers have access to an employer-sponsored savings plan for retirement, and of those, about 75% choose to enroll. Those who do not have access tend to be low-wage workers and workers who work for smaller employers. And the next three slides just cover that data. This one is a little bit, the definitions are a little bit specific, but they're there for a reason, so I'll just step through them. Having access to an employer-sponsored plan simply means that the employee works for the employer who offers a retirement plan. The take-up rate is the percentage of those who have access that choose to enroll. And the middle definition, participation, is there specifically because that's the percentage of the entire group who participates, so those who have access and those who don't. The reason we chose to include all 3 points of data is to drive home the point that if people do not have access, by and large, they do not participate. So BLS has they've crunched the numbers and they've determined that if folks do not have access to a savings plan through their employer, only 5% go out and get something like an IRA. This continues to cut that employer access data in various ways. This slide presents the comparison between those having access to a defined benefit and those having access to a defined contribution. You can see the pattern follows the trend line that I showed earlier. And this demonstrates the difference with access and participation depending on your employer size. So the second factor that affects people's preparedness in retirement is having a plan that incorporates some automatic features. And this chart demonstrates, it's actually a simulation of data, and the simulation estimates what will people's retirement savings be if they haven't been automatically enrolled in a retirement savings plan, and what will their savings be if they are automatically enrolled. And you can see the impact of automatic enrollment. People do better. They wind up with higher levels of savings, and in particular, the low earners who are those at more risk of falling short, there's a bigger impact for that particular subgroup. And I mentioned that those who have access to defined benefit fare better in retirement, and this is risk at age 65 depending on the type of pension coverage you have. Fewer people who have access and participate in their defined benefit wind up with lower risk of falling short in retirement. We were asked to conduct this research to really establish the status of retirement for private sector employees. We took what we learned and we've dovetailed it with the initiatives and the actions that are underway here at CalSTRS. There's a lot of effort being put into financial literacy. There's interest in automatic features, and we've got several communication and outreach activities to encourage supplemental savings. I briefed this quickly because I showed it the last time I was here. This is a demonstration that there's an opportunity to increase awareness of our members around their benefits. When asked about what they expect their replacement rate to be, 41% of our members say they're not sure. And when we asked our members about their interest in auto enrollment and supplemental savings, the vast majority expressed some level of interest. This is just an information slide about the communication and outreach activities we have underway to encourage supplemental savings. The latest is the 3-part financial awareness series, as well as a number of other activities. So in conclusion, a number of people are at risk of falling short, regardless how we look at the data, regardless of which methodology we use. It's fairly conclusive evidence that a lot of people are not saving at all or enough. Low-wage workers and the workers that are employed at small businesses have the lowest access to employer-sponsored plans. Auto features tend to produce better retirement preparedness outcomes for folks. And we are always looking at ways to increase member awareness, and we're looking at addressing the interest in automatic enrollment. Questions?
Thanks, Ms. Dobbins. I think there might be some questions.
Okay.
It's an excellent report. Mr. Rosenstein.
Very interesting. I was just wondering, do we have any sense as to whether data for California track the national data, or things look better, things look worse? Any insight into that?
I don't have specific numbers right at the top of my head. We are looking at research all the time, and my understanding for California is that things look fairly negative due to the high cost of living here.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Ms. Dillon?
Have we ever considered doing anything along the lines of the demography that we have in California? So I guess I'm not quite sure how to ask it. We've done things where we've studied how much money our pensioners bring into legislative districts and things like that. But have we ever taken a look to see what the needs would be for retirees in different parts of California? Someone in my neck of the woods might not have to have as high a replacement ratio as maybe somebody in the Bay Area, and I'm not even sure that's something that can be measured, or something along the lines of this study, but in more local within the state. Have we ever done anything like that? Has anybody ever tried to take that on that you know of?
So I don't think that we have anything underway at this time. My team is kind of struggling, trying to understand retirement preparedness on the more granular level, because those specific variables make a difference. And when we think about our teachers and what they're going to need, where you live, right, how much debt you're carrying, what your expectations around the style that you want to live in retirement, all those things really matter. And it becomes difficult to get the quantitative data, so it's a matter of asking qualitative questions. And we've actually performed about 2 attempts to try and start getting at some of this detail, and we don't quite have the right way to ask yet, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Boykin?
Thanks. I was just going to address your question, Paul. So the data, well, first, National Institute on Retirement Security did a report that kind of scores the states, and Alyssa's right. Partly probably the housing issue in California, if you're only replacing 40 to 50%, but at the low end of your income level, you can be spending 30, 40% already on housing costs, and that makes a difference. But in terms of access to workplace plans, California is about half or just under half, which is about consistent with across the country. And the current estimate is about 7.5 million California workers don't have access.
Mr. Rosenstruck.
So I'll thank you, Grant, for answering my question. I will try to answer Dana's question. California Budget and Policy Center does produce an annual report on the cost of living to maintain a minimal standard of living by county in California. I can't get on the website right now, but I can provide that to you.
That'd be under the California budget.
It's the new name is the California Budget and Policy Center. Yes.
Anyone else? So I wanted, yeah.
When you finish, I was going to ask Lisa to just kind of preview for you what she's going to be bringing to you next time in the research study with Berkeley. Do you mind just telling the purpose of that study so you can kind of hear how that takes us to the next place?
Sure. Why don't you do that, and then I'll make a comment, maybe a question. So go ahead.
Okay. So we have research underway, and we're partnering with a researcher out of UC Berkeley, and the research is being conducted to assess the fit of the CalSTRS benefit to the employees. And the effort at this point has shown it's done a deep and specific look at turnover data, because there's a lot of question about do teachers stay long enough, and can I preview what we're seeing?
Sure.
Okay. What we're seeing is that there's a lot of churn in the under 5-year teaching years, very parallel to what we see in turnover data with almost any occupation. I went and looked and compared. First 5 years, people tend to move around a lot. After that, people tend to stay, and the majority of our teachers are reaching that 20-year mark, and many are reaching the 35-year mark. The second half of the research is conducted to really assess where the crossover point is. What would the benefit to teachers be if they were doing something else with their money? And I have not seen the results from that yet.
Mr. Boykin.
Well, thanks. First, thanks for the report, but I'm interested in this one because right now it seems like there's a lot of research on the fit between DV plans and teachers, and it sounds like this is sort of a sophisticated approach. And I was wondering, is it UC Berkeley Labor Center working on it? Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool.
So a couple of thoughts. It's a really good report. So, and what do you do with a report, right? So you get a report, you get a present. So what does it mean for us? It's kind of what I'm thinking. It's like, so what does this really mean? What can we do that's actionable as a board, and should we be doing it? I think, yes, we should be taking action because I think it fits into our mandate of ensuring retirement security for California's educators. We know what the numbers are with replacement ratios, with what it's 65 to 75% of your last year's comp is what you're going to retire on or something. So we need our educators in the state need, and we know the Social Security. We know the story.
Right.
And a missing part of it is, in yesterday's meeting, we dealt with asset allocation, we're dealing with investments, we're talking about billions of dollars, we're talking about new strategies. But this is kind of the bread and butter of our work. And I think our challenge is to, and I certainly don't expect any answers today, but I just raised some of these thoughts for, to get us thinking. I do think as a board we need to be forward thinking and how we have defined retirement in the past and how it's being defined today. I would go out on a limb to say that in the next decade, the definition of retirement will begin to evolve and potentially change. Whether it changes dramatically, I don't know. But we know what's happening with healthcare. We know life expectancy is going up. We know what's happening with technology and innovation and efficiencies, et cetera. I think all of those will impact how we, look, as a system, look at retirement. So how do we wrestle with a big question like that? Should we be wrestling with it? I think yes. Where and how and when, I don't know. Secondly, I think there are key facts within the report that are indisputable. One is the whole idea around supplemental retirement accounts, 401ks, 403b, that when given too many choices, the opt-out is no action. The longer you wait, the more costly it is for you to save. We probably all could sit around here and say, boy, I wish I knew when I was 25 what I know today. Right? Everybody in the room could probably say that. You lose out on the power of compounding. You lose out on the tax advantages of putting away additional income. We know by the report that there's a lack of financial literacy. Some very, very smart people don't have financial literacy skills and knowledge. So what role can CalSTRS play in all of this, specifically to the educators of our state? So my challenge to the board and to our staff is to start thinking about that. What can we be? I think we can be, and have proven to be, just a honest broker of the truth without any real conflict, without any conflict. Vendors are conflicted, and there's nothing wrong with conflicts. It's just disclosing what those are. Unfortunately, many of our members are, for lack of better terms, taken advantage of by people that are conflicted who don't disclose what those conflicts are. CalSTRS doesn't have that conflict. Our interest is the retirement security of California's educators. So we can be a truth teller. We have the Pension 2 product. I think we could do more we could double down our efforts in terms of reaching out to our members to get more people engaged in the Pension 2 product. What does that mean relative to budget and how we allocate resources? That's going to require, technology helps. A lot of people use technology. The younger generation use that. But there's still no substitute for somebody with credibility standing before people and saying this is a good idea for you. That they trust you. There's 100 teachers in the room, they trust you. How do we get that message out to help people make choices? And there's so many different ways teachers and educators can do it. I'll give one example and then I'll just be quiet because we've got to get on with our day. But I do think this report is, for me, is a call for us to be challenged as a board. What can we do? Not today, not tomorrow, not necessarily in this year, but long term. If you look at how educators in the state are compensated, generally the first 12 years of their experience, their built-in salary raises. You can get in front of large groups of educators and work with stakeholder groups where a portion of those annual salary increases automatically go into your retirement. There's lots of different creative ways to do that. It's in the weeds, and we don't necessarily have to be in the weeds, and we shouldn't be, but I do think we can play a big role, and we have a responsibility to help better prepare our members to retire with security and dignity. And I think this report provides us some evidence of the challenge that's before us and the opportunity. So lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, none of which I think need to be addressed today, but I don't think it's a report that we should put up on the shelf. Thank you. Okay? All right, thank you, Ms. Dobbins. Which brings us to item 14. There were no items referred to the committee. Item 15, new business and review information requested. Yes, could you remind us what that was?
Yes, I just have the one from item 8, the comparison of how we're doing in securities litigation recovery compared to multiple funds.
Thank you. Anyone else, Ms. Dillon?
Can I do?
Yeah, let me. Go ahead.
So Ed, I think this goes to you. Ideally, it probably would be better to be done in benefits and services, but since we're not meeting until April, I'm hearing from a lot of the districts around my area where I live and from elsewhere in the state that they're having a tremendous difficulty getting substitutes. So there's this huge substitute shortage. We already know that we have a program with our retirement incentive that if someone receives that and then they come back to work within the 5 years, they're penalized. Well, I shouldn't say penalized. They lose their incentive. Is it possible to, do we have the information readily available that we know how many people have received the incentive? Do we know how many people that have lost it? I just think that there's going to be some districts, like in small communities, where the school is the only game in town. They're going to call a retiree. The retiree's not going to think about it. And because there's nobody else that can come in to sub, they're going to end up subbing and then losing their incentive. So, I mean, if there's going to be the shortage, I'd like to have that information so we can take a look at what maybe if we want to do something with it. And then I would ask that we would remind our retirees that are in that program that even though there's a retiree, a sub shortage, they're under the rules by which they retired and don't go back and sub.
Yeah, actually, I mean, we do have data on how many get the incentives and how many would lose it. I was just looking at the statistics, and my recollection, only a few hundred people get the incentive in any 1 year. That's not a common problem. I suspect the bigger issue is that people tend to want to hire substitutes who are newly retired, and the earnings limitation on those in their first 180 days is severe. It's a 0% limit. And so if you go back and do any kind of subbing at all, you're basically, we're reducing your benefit dollar for dollar. So that seems to be the bigger obstacle than the incentives.
Absolutely.
But we can certainly provide, and we can certainly give you information around what the experience is with the subs and all of that.
The financial implications aren't
Sure.
as bad for those that are, the 180 days, because they're still making money by subbing.
Right.
They're just losing that portion of.
Well, they're making money, but it's being offset by reduced
by
benefits. So
losing- by
the
losing this,
net
absolutely.
the net value is zero unless they're making a tremendous amount of money.
Absolutely. But somebody has to pay worth 5 years.
Yes,
worth of
that
incentive.
you're right. If they're losing the entire incentive, then yeah. But we'll get you the information on that though,
All
for
right,
sure.
and if
Yeah.
we could just remind them, please, that don't
Yep.
go there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Ed.
Ms. Hendricks?
And you can just hang out for a second if you want. Just make yourself comfortable. Just in light of Harry's comments on the last report, I just had a quick, and I know we don't want to have a big conversation, but 3 things popped in my head that maybe, I guess, benefits and services in April can talk about, but auto enroll, pension too. Can we kind of get an update? I don't know if this is the right place to ask for that, but if we can, that's one thing I thought of in terms of the report in response that's tangible that we could do. Second one is financial literacy. At the Guild conference, we kind of piloted the, what was it called? The workshop?
Financial literacy series or something.
Financial
like that.
literacy series.
Right.
So it'd be good to hear more about that
Okay.
and how we can be more proactive with younger teachers and faculty around just understanding money, budgeting, that kind of stuff. And it would be good to hear from that. And then just that idea of benefit fairs and conferences at service centers. I'm not going to let it die.
I know.
Just the idea of having our service centers partnering with our faculty associations, unions, and teacher groups around the state.
Yeah.
And we provide sort of the package education. They provide the food and get people
And
there
bodies.
kind of thing.
Right.
And I think to me that's some practical ways that we can address some of the issues around this report that are really
Yeah, Aaron and I
tangible.
we've had some discussions around that. We can do some further work on that, report back to the committee.
Great.
The other thing that might be interesting, Ed, is I was thinking as you're talking, the International Foundation on Employee Benefit Plans is a big national educational organization on benefits. I'm chairing the board this year actually for the public sector. But they just finished doing a piece on really looking at all the types of financial education that are out there, and then actually talking about what works and what doesn't work. They've done some assessment because there's so much being thrown out at people. Maybe I'll.
Basics, like how to set, compounded interest and
Yeah.
just basic stuff.
Let me look at that research, and I might even ask the researcher to see if she might even present it. We've been doing a lot of work at the foundation on this issue. I'll think about that, see what we do.
Anything else? Dismissed.
You are now dismissed. Class is dismissed.
So
we're looking at the agenda?
Yeah, we're going to look at the agenda. It's pretty straightforward. We asked, we're going to do a little budget workshop in February.
Yeah,
We'll do that upstairs, Jeff?
Well, actually, I was going to physically suggest if we could doing it next door. We'll open up the wall in the Sacramento room, and the reason for is that room is mic'd, and so again, if we have an audience, it makes it a little easier for everybody to hear. Those aren't mic'd upstairs. It's not physically mic'd, that room. So if we could do it next door, well, it'd still be casual, but it'd be a better room to do it in for us. And then, of course, the big item is the actuarial experience study we talked about earlier, and then Lisa will be back with the Berkeley study.
Good. Okay. Opportunities for comments from members of the public. Aggie Ellis, CTA Retirement Committee Chair.
Good, I don't have to announce myself. Thanks, Harry. Gosh, after yesterday where this room was just packed tight with people and then just see just a few of us remaining for the whole meeting, it's it's not as dramatic as I wanted it to be. But I did want to tell the board and the staff and consultants who aren't here, but hopefully you can relay the message, how appreciative we are of the conversation that the board and the staff and the consultants had yesterday. I think it was one of the most well choreographed educational pieces that I have sat through, in which everything just made very logical sense. And so from an educator, it was structured very well, scaffolded very well for us. And know that we really support these transparent discussions. As an active who's got another 10 to 12 years before I retire, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm not going to be one of those who's going to leave the profession early. I'm here until I can't do it anymore. So your vision of what you're looking at for the asset allocation as a long-term strategy, as well as looking at short terms, we have the same interests of looking at the whole picture and supporting you in whatever it is that we need to make sure that our funding strategy stays solid and that we are the leaders, again, in the way that you conduct business. So I just wanted to make sure I emphasize that to you all, that I know the day was long, I know the discussions are hard, I know it's an uncertain world, and our own opinions can sometimes conflict with what we think we need to do, or it's a different world, and I respect that and I understand that, but you are highly appreciated by the educators of California Teachers Association, and I wanted you to be able to end your week with that.
Awesome.
Maggie, you're more than highly appreciated.
That's like getting a sticker.
You're more than highly
that.
appreciated.
A star. That was nice.
Maggie's the real deal in the trenches.
Absolutely.
Okay. So seeing no other questions or comments, we will adjourn and we will... Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, Jack, thank you.
One other thing.
We have, as you know, we created the subcommittee to the investment committee. So the first meeting of that group is December the 4th. It will be in Los Angeles.
Glendale.
In Glendale, the Glendale office. And the members of that committee are Ms. Ortega, Mr. Unterman, Ms. Yee, Ms. Dillon, and myself. And we will be meeting on December the 4th in Glendale. So we're looking forward to putting that committee together. First order of business will be drafting a charter, and we'll keep everyone updated. Okay, so that's December 4th.
And you'll report back into the
And we'll report back up through the investment committee, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, anything else to go to the order? Seeing none, we'll break until 3 o'clock, and then we'll come back into closed session. Okay, thanks.